The most dangerous secret is not the one people hide from the world, but the one the world refuses to see. On a bright Saturday morning in the small town of Willow Creek, Georgia, the Thompson family prepared for what should have been the happiest wedding day of the year. White roses decorated the church entrance. Guests filled the wooden pews. A string quartet played softly near the altar. Yet behind the beautiful decorations, tension hung heavily in the air. 28-year-old Savannah Brooks stood alone in a small bridal room, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The white wedding dress she wore had never been chosen for her. Every detail of the ceremony had been planned for her older sister, Vanessa Brooks. But less than 24 hours before the wedding, Vanessa had disappeared. She left behind a short message refusing to marry Ethan Carter, the man she publicly called the town fool. Savannah still remembered the chaos that followed. Her father had shouted. Her mother had cried. Relatives argued late into the night. But none of them worried about Ethan. They worried about embarrassment. They worried about reputation. They worried about what people would say if the wedding collapsed. Finally, someone suggested a solution. Savannah, the younger daughter, the responsible daughter, the daughter who always sacrificed for everyone else. At first, she refused. Then her father reminded her of the medical bills her mother still struggled to pay. He reminded her of family obligations. He reminded her that sometimes people had to do unpleasant things for those they loved. And so Savannah found herself wearing another woman's wedding dress, preparing to marry a man she barely knew. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Her mother entered quietly. Tears filled her eyes. "I am sorry," she whispered. Savannah forced a smile. "It is all right." But both women knew it was not. Outside, guests whispered openly. Everyone in Willow Creek knew Ethan Carter. At least they thought they did. For years he lived in a small house near the edge of town. He worked odd jobs. He spoke very little. People laughed at him. Some claimed he was slow. Others called him foolish. Children occasionally mocked him as he walked through town. Yet Ethan never argued, never defended himself, never seemed angry. He simply smiled politely and continued on his way. That calmness only made people mock him more. Now he sat alone near the front of the church, waiting for a bride who was not supposed to be there. As Savannah stepped into the sanctuary, conversations immediately erupted around her. Guests exchanged confused looks. Several people openly pointed. The groom's expression, however, never changed. Ethan stood calmly at the altar in a simple black suit. While others looked shocked, he looked almost peaceful. Savannah found that strange. If she had been abandoned one day before her wedding, she would not be smiling. The ceremony began. Every step toward the altar felt heavier than the last. Savannah could hear whispers throughout the church. Poor girl. What a waste. She deserved better. Imagine marrying him. Yet when she finally reached the altar and looked directly into Ethan's eyes, something unexpected happened. For the first time all morning, she felt calm. His eyes did not contain embarrassment. They did not contain resentment. Instead, they held quiet understanding, as though he somehow knew exactly how difficult this moment was for her. The vows were exchanged. The rings were placed. Applause followed, though much of it sounded forced. When the ceremony ended, guests quickly gathered outside discussing the scandal. Savannah overheard relatives criticizing the marriage before the reception even began. Yet Ethan never reacted. He simply thanked people politely and continued smiling. Hours later, as the reception drew to a close, Savannah noticed something peculiar. A black luxury vehicle pulled briefly into the parking lot. Two men wearing expensive suits stepped out. They approached Ethan with obvious respect. One appeared ready to say something important. The moment he noticed Savannah watching, however, Ethan gave a subtle shake of his head. The men immediately stopped speaking, nodded respectfully, and returned to the vehicle. Savannah watched in confusion as the car disappeared down the road. For the first time that day, she began wondering whether the entire town might be wrong about the man she had just married. The reception ended just before sunset, and the newly married couple drove away beneath a sky painted in shades of gold and amber. Savannah Brooks sat quietly in the passenger seat of Ethan Carter's aging pickup truck, still trying to process everything that had happened during the past 24 hours. Her sister had vanished. Her family had pressured her into taking another woman's place. And now she was legally married to a man the entire town considered foolish. Yet the more time she spent near Ethan, the less sense those rumors seemed to make. During the drive, Ethan barely spoke. Not because he appeared nervous or confused, but because he seemed comfortable with silence. Every so often he glanced toward Savannah to make sure she was all right. The simple gesture felt unexpectedly considerate. Most people had spent the day worrying about appearances. Ethan seemed to be the only person concerned about how she actually felt. Nearly 40 minutes later, they arrived at a small white farmhouse located on several acres of land outside Willow Creek. Savannah blinked in surprise. The property was modest, but beautifully maintained. Fresh flowers surrounded the front porch. The lawn looked immaculate. Wind chimes swayed gently near the entrance. Nothing about the place resembled the neglected home she expected. Ethan carried her suitcase inside and quietly showed her around. The furniture was simple but elegant. The kitchen looked spotless. Bookshelves lined an entire wall of the living room. Savannah paused beside them. There were hundreds of books. History, economics, business, literature. Some appeared highly technical. She turned toward Ethan. "You read all of these?" Ethan smiled. "Most of them." Savannah frowned slightly. That answer created even more questions. The man everyone called a fool owned enough advanced books to fill a university office. Before she could ask more, a knock sounded at the front door. Ethan excused himself and stepped outside. Curious, Savannah moved toward the nearby window. A luxury black sedan sat in the driveway. The same vehicle she noticed earlier at the reception. Two sharply dressed men stood beside Ethan. Their body language immediately caught her attention. They were treating him with unmistakable respect. One man handed Ethan a folder. Another appeared to ask for instructions. Ethan responded calmly. After a brief conversation, both men nodded and returned to the car. Savannah stepped away from the window before he came back inside. Her heart raced with curiosity. Nothing about that interaction fit the image Willow Creek had created around him. Later that evening, while unpacking her belongings in the guest bedroom, she overheard her phone ringing. Vanessa's name appeared on the screen. Savannah answered immediately. Her sister sounded annoyed rather than apologetic. "So you actually married him?" Savannah stared in disbelief. "You disappeared." Vanessa laughed lightly. "Because I refused to ruin my life." The comment stung. "You left me to deal with everything." "You should thank me," Vanessa replied. "Now you have a husband." Savannah looked around the room. For the first time all day, frustration surfaced. "You do not even know him." Vanessa scoffed. "Nobody needs to know him. Everybody already knows what he is." The call ended shortly afterward, but Savannah remained unsettled. Deep down, she no longer believed what everyone claimed. As midnight approached, she walked into the kitchen for a glass of water. Lights still glowed beneath the office door at the end of the hallway. Curious, she approached quietly. Through a small opening, she caught a glimpse of Ethan seated behind a desk covered with financial reports. Multiple computer screens displayed charts, market data, and business projections far too complex for the man people described. His expression was focused, sharp, intelligent. Nothing about him appeared foolish. Savannah stepped back immediately, her pulse quickening. Standing alone in the dark hallway, she realized something important. Either Ethan Carter was the greatest actor she had ever met, or the entire town had been deceived for years. The next morning, Savannah Brooks woke earlier than usual. Sunlight streamed through the farmhouse windows, casting warm golden patterns across the wooden floor. For a few moments, she forgot where she was. Then the events of the previous day returned all at once. The wedding, the rumors, the strange men in expensive suits, and most importantly, the image of Ethan Carter sitting behind computer screens analyzing business reports that looked far beyond the abilities people attributed to him. She dressed quietly and walked toward the kitchen. The smell of fresh coffee greeted her immediately. Ethan stood near the stove preparing breakfast. He looked relaxed, wearing a simple gray shirt and jeans. If she had not seen what happened the previous night, she might have believed every rumor herself. "Good morning," Ethan said with a warm smile. Savannah nodded. "Good morning." Breakfast passed peacefully. Ethan spoke politely, but never excessively. He asked whether she slept well. He offered to show her around the property later if she wanted. There was nothing forced about his kindness. It felt natural, genuine. After eating, Savannah stepped outside onto the porch while Ethan worked in a nearby barn. The property stretched farther than she originally realized. Several acres of beautiful land surrounded the farmhouse. Everything appeared carefully maintained. As she explored, she noticed something unusual parked behind a row of trees near the edge of the property. Curious, she walked closer. Her eyes widened. Hidden from the road sat 3 luxury vehicles worth more than most homes in Willow Creek. Savannah stared in disbelief. Why would a man everyone called poor own vehicles like these? Before she could examine them further, Ethan appeared from behind the barn carrying a toolbox. For a brief second, surprise crossed his face. Then it disappeared. Beautiful cars, are they not? He asked casually. Savannah folded her arms. They are yours. Ethan smiled lightly. Not exactly. That answer raised even more questions. Throughout the afternoon, Savannah continued noticing things that did not fit together. Delivery drivers arrived carrying packages addressed to Ethan from companies located in New York, Chicago, and San Francisco. Several envelopes bore the names of major financial firms. One package contained documents requiring signatures. Ethan reviewed them quickly before placing them inside a locked desk drawer. Nothing about his behavior resembled a confused man struggling through life. Instead, he appeared organized, disciplined, deliberately careful. Later that evening, Savannah decided to visit town for groceries. As she entered a local market, familiar whispers immediately followed. Several residents offered sympathetic smiles. Others exchanged amused looks. One woman approached directly. "You are adjusting all right?" she asked. Savannah knew exactly what the woman meant. "I am fine." The woman lowered her voice. "You are stronger than I would be. Marrying him could not have been easy." Savannah forced a polite smile, but said nothing. For the first time, she felt irritated by the town's assumptions. None of these people truly knew Ethan. Yet all of them seemed confident judging him. On her way home, another unexpected event occurred. Traffic slowed near the center of town where several business owners stood gathered outside a bank. People appeared anxious. Curious, Savannah stopped briefly. She overheard fragments of conversation. A major development project had collapsed unexpectedly. Several local businesses faced significant financial losses. Investors were pulling out. The entire town seemed worried. When she returned home, she found Ethan sitting on the porch reading a newspaper. "Did you hear about the project?" she asked. Ethan nodded calmly. "Yes. Everyone is panicking." Ethan folded the paper. "Things are rarely as bad as they seem." His confidence surprised her. Most people sounded terrified. Ethan looked almost unconcerned. That night, after dinner, Savannah stepped outside for fresh air. The stars shone brightly above the quiet countryside. As she walked near the driveway, headlights appeared in the distance. Another luxury vehicle approached the farmhouse. This time she remained hidden behind the porch railing. A distinguished older man exited the car and immediately approached Ethan. To Savannah's shock, the visitor shook Ethan's hand with obvious respect and addressed him as Sir. The conversation lasted only a few minutes before the man departed. Ethan remained standing alone beneath the porch light afterward. Savannah watched silently from the shadows. Every day revealed another contradiction. Every answer created new mysteries. And deep inside, she could no longer ignore the growing suspicion that the man she married was hiding something far bigger than anyone in Willow Creek could possibly imagine. 1 week later, Savannah Brooks received an invitation that immediately made her uneasy. Her parents were hosting a large family gathering to celebrate her cousin's engagement. Nearly everyone in Willow Creek would attend. The moment she read the message, she understood the real purpose. It was not a celebration. It was an opportunity for relatives and neighbors to observe the town's newest source of gossip, her marriage. That evening, she showed the invitation to Ethan. He studied it briefly before smiling. "Would you like to go?" Savannah hesitated. "Not really." Ethan nodded. "Then we do not have to." His answer surprised her. Most husbands might insist. Others might feel offended. Ethan simply respected her feelings. Yet after a long pause, Savannah sighed. "If we stay home, people will talk anyway." Ethan laughed softly. "People always talk." Despite his advice, Savannah eventually decided to attend. Part of her hoped the evening might finally help her understand him better. If Ethan truly was hiding something, perhaps being around others would reveal it. Saturday arrived with clear skies and warm temperatures. The event took place at a large country club outside town. As soon as Savannah and Ethan entered the reception hall, conversations noticeably shifted. Heads turned. Whispers spread from table to table. Some guests smiled politely. Others made little effort to hide their amusement. Savannah felt tension building inside her chest, but Ethan remained perfectly calm. It was almost as if none of it affected him. Her parents greeted them near the entrance. Her father barely acknowledged Ethan before leading Savannah toward a group of relatives. Within minutes, the comments began. An aunt asked whether married life was interesting, in a tone that sounded more insulting than curious. A cousin joked that Ethan probably spent his days counting clouds. Several guests laughed. Savannah forced a smile while Ethan quietly sipped iced tea. The more people mocked him, the more confused she became. Why did he never react? The answer came partially an hour later. During dinner, one of her uncles decided to entertain the table. Raising his glass, he loudly announced, "I think Ethan should give us some financial advice. After all, everybody knows he is an expert businessman." Laughter erupted throughout the room. Several guests nearly choked on their drinks. Savannah felt her face burn with embarrassment. She expected Ethan to lower his head or leave. Instead, he calmly set down his fork. "I would be happy to." The laughter faded immediately. Ethan's expression remained pleasant. "For example, I would recommend avoiding unnecessary debt, investing with patience, and never making decisions based entirely on public opinion." The table fell strangely quiet. His response sounded intelligent. More intelligent than anyone expected. Before the conversation could continue, Savannah's cousin interrupted with another joke, steering attention elsewhere. Yet Savannah noticed something important. Several older guests exchanged curious looks. They seemed surprised too. Later that evening, a more serious discussion emerged near the ballroom entrance. Business owners from Willow Creek were debating the development project that recently collapsed. Everyone sounded worried. Millions of dollars were potentially at risk. One investor complained that no solution existed. Another predicted several local companies might fail. As the conversation grew increasingly negative, Ethan quietly spoke from the edge of the group. "The project is recoverable." Silence followed. Several people turned toward him. One businessman laughed. "And how exactly would you know that?" Ethan offered a small smile. "Because the underlying assets still hold value. The structure is the problem, not the opportunity." Savannah watched the room carefully. Something remarkable happened. For a brief moment, nobody laughed. Nobody mocked him. Several business owners appeared genuinely interested. Then her cousin rolled his eyes dramatically. "Here we go again." The spell broke. Conversations resumed. People dismissed Ethan's comments. Yet Savannah noticed two executives standing nearby exchange thoughtful glances. They seemed to recognize something the others missed. As the evening ended and guests prepared to leave, Savannah looked around the crowded ballroom. Everyone believed they understood Ethan Carter. Everyone believed he was exactly what they said he was. Yet each passing day made that assumption harder to believe. And judging by the expressions she saw on a few faces that night, she was no longer the only person beginning to question the story Willow Creek had accepted for years. 3 days after the family gathering, the crisis surrounding Willow Creek's failed development project reached a breaking point. Local newspapers published alarming headlines. Investors continued withdrawing support. Several small business owners feared they might lose everything they had spent years building. The entire town seemed trapped beneath a cloud of uncertainty. Savannah Brooks noticed the tension everywhere she went. Coffee shops buzzed with worried conversations. Store owners stood outside discussing rumors. Even her parents appeared nervous whenever the subject surfaced. One afternoon, Savannah visited her mother, who confessed that several relatives had invested money in the project. "People are scared," her mother admitted. "Nobody knows what happens next." On the drive home, Savannah could not stop thinking about it. The situation felt larger than anyone realized. Yet when she arrived at the farmhouse, Ethan Carter appeared completely calm. He sat on the front porch reviewing documents while the evening sun painted the countryside in shades of orange and gold. "Everyone in town is worried," Savannah said as she approached. Ethan looked up. "I know. How can you be so relaxed?" Ethan closed the folder in his hands. "Because panic rarely solves problems." His answer sounded simple, but something about the confidence behind it caught her attention. That night, another luxury vehicle arrived shortly after sunset. Savannah recognized the pattern by now. Expensive cars, well-dressed visitors, conversations held away from curious eyes. This time, however, she observed something unusual. Instead of meeting on the porch, Ethan invited 3 visitors into his office. The meeting lasted nearly 4 hours. Through the closed door, Savannah occasionally heard fragments of conversation. Numbers, contracts, financing, deadlines. Nothing sounded like the discussion of a man people considered foolish. Around midnight, the visitors finally departed. As they left, one of them shook Ethan's hand and said something that froze Savannah in place. "We will move immediately, sir." "Sir." Once again, not friend, not neighbor. "Sir." The following morning brought unexpected news. Local radio stations announced that an anonymous financial group had stepped forward with a recovery plan for the development project. The proposal would stabilize investments, protect local businesses, and prevent widespread losses. Nobody knew who was behind it. Speculation spread throughout town almost instantly. By lunchtime, business owners gathered outside restaurants discussing the mysterious rescue effort. Some called it a miracle. Others claimed a major corporation must be involved. Savannah listened carefully while running errands. Every conversation increased her curiosity. That evening, she returned home to find Ethan repairing a fence near the barn. Looking at him standing there beneath the setting sun, dressed in work clothes and carrying simple tools, she struggled to reconcile the image with everything she had witnessed recently. Finally, she decided to ask a direct question. "Do you know anything about the recovery plan?" Ethan paused briefly before smiling. "Why would you think that?" Savannah folded her arms. "Because every time something unusual happens, you somehow already know about it." Ethan laughed softly. "That is not an answer." "Neither is yours," Savannah replied. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan returned to his work. Sometimes solutions appear when people stop looking in obvious places. His response only deepened the mystery. 2 days later, the impossible happened. The recovery plan succeeded. Investors returned. Construction resumed. Businesses that expected disaster suddenly found themselves safe. Willow Creek erupted with celebration. Reporters arrived. Community leaders praised the unknown group responsible. Yet the greatest surprise came when Savannah saw several of the same executives who visited Ethan standing beside town officials during a press conference. Their faces were unmistakable. Her heart raced. As applause echoed through the crowd gathered downtown, Savannah realized one thing with absolute certainty. Ethan was connected to the miracle everyone was celebrating. The only question remaining was how deeply involved he truly was. And for the first time since their wedding day, she suspected the answer might change everything. The success of the recovery plan transformed Willow Creek almost overnight. But for Savannah Brooks, the biggest change was not happening in town. It was happening inside her own mind. Every answer she uncovered about Ethan Carter seemed to create 3 new questions. The man she married continued living exactly as before. He still drove the same pickup truck. He still worked around the farmhouse. He still greeted neighbors with the same quiet smile. Yet Savannah could no longer ignore the growing evidence surrounding him. One afternoon, while organizing paperwork in the house, she accidentally discovered a newspaper clipping tucked inside a drawer. The article was several years old. Most of the page had been folded away, but one photograph remained visible. Savannah stared at it. A younger Ethan stood among a group of executives outside a glass skyscraper. He wore a tailored suit and appeared completely different from the man Willow Creek believed him to be. Before she could read the article, footsteps approached. She quickly returned the clipping to its place. Ethan entered carrying groceries. His expression remained calm, but Savannah wondered whether he knew exactly what she had found. That evening they sat together on the porch watching the sunset. The silence between them felt comfortable now, very different from the awkwardness that followed their wedding. Finally, Savannah spoke. "Why did you choose Willow Creek?" Ethan looked toward the horizon. "Because nobody expected anything from me here." The answer lingered in the air. "And that was important?" she asked. Ethan nodded slowly. "Sometimes people only see what they want to see. Once they decide who you are, it becomes very difficult to change their minds." Savannah thought about those words long after the conversation ended. 2 days later, another surprise arrived. A formal invitation appeared in the mailbox. The mayor of Willow Creek was hosting a celebration honoring the anonymous group that rescued the development project. Business leaders, investors, and community officials from across the state would attend. Savannah expected Ethan to ignore the invitation. Instead, he studied it carefully. "We should go," he said. The event took place the following weekend at the largest hotel in the region. Savannah wore an elegant navy dress. Ethan arrived in a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly. The transformation startled her. For the first time since their marriage, he looked exactly like the man from the newspaper photograph. As they entered the ballroom, Savannah immediately sensed something unusual. Several influential guests recognized Ethan. Some nodded respectfully. Others appeared genuinely surprised to see him there. Throughout the evening, people approached their table. None openly revealed anything, but their behavior spoke volumes. Executives listened carefully whenever Ethan offered an opinion. Investors greeted him warmly. One elderly businessman even thanked him for advice that had changed his company years earlier. Savannah watched every interaction carefully. The pieces of the puzzle were finally beginning to align. Then the most unexpected moment of the night arrived. Across the ballroom, she spotted Vanessa. Her sister had returned to Willow Creek. Dressed elegantly and surrounded by friends, Vanessa appeared confident at first. But the moment she noticed Ethan, her expression changed. Confusion replaced confidence. She spent the next hour quietly observing him from across the room. Savannah could almost see the realization forming. The man Vanessa rejected was not the man she thought he was. Near the end of the evening, a nationally known business executive entered the ballroom. Conversations immediately stopped. The executive scanned the room, spotted Ethan, and walked directly toward him. Then, in front of dozens of stunned guests, he extended his hand and said, "It is an honor to finally see you again, Mr. Carter. Everyone has been waiting for your return." At that moment, Savannah knew the truth was closer than ever, and Willow Creek was about to discover that the quiet man they mocked for years was hiding a story far beyond anything they had imagined. The ballroom remained unusually quiet after the executive's greeting. Conversations that normally filled the room with energy seemed to vanish beneath a wave of curiosity. Savannah Brooks watched the scene unfold carefully. The nationally respected businessman who had just entered was known throughout the state. People listened when he spoke. Yet he stood before Ethan Carter with genuine admiration. Ethan, however, appeared almost uncomfortable with the attention. He shook the man's hand politely and attempted to redirect the conversation elsewhere. But the damage was already done. Dozens of guests had witnessed the exchange. Questions spread across the room faster than whispers. Savannah noticed Vanessa standing frozen near one of the tables. Her sister's confident smile had disappeared entirely. For years, Vanessa had described Ethan as an embarrassment. She had refused to marry him without hesitation. Yet now she watched influential executives greet him as though he were someone extraordinarily important. The contrast was impossible to ignore. As the evening continued, more guests approached Ethan. Some asked for advice. Others thanked him for past opportunities. One investor spoke about a successful partnership from years earlier. Another referenced projects in major cities across the country. Savannah listened closely to every conversation. None revealed the complete truth, but together they painted a picture that looked nothing like the life Ethan supposedly lived. Later that evening, Vanessa finally approached Savannah. "What is happening?" she asked quietly. Savannah studied her sister's expression. For the first time, uncertainty had replaced arrogance. "I was hoping you could tell me," Savannah replied. Vanessa glanced across the ballroom toward Ethan. "You mean you really do not know?" Savannah shook her head. The answer surprised them both. Vanessa looked away. For several moments, she said nothing. Then she spoke softly. "I thought I knew exactly who he was." Savannah followed her gaze. So did everyone else. The conversation ended there, but the discomfort remained. As guests began leaving the event, an organizer approached Ethan with an unexpected request. The mayor wanted to publicly thank the individuals responsible for helping save the development project. A brief presentation was scheduled before the evening concluded. Ethan politely declined. Yet after several minutes of persuasion, he reluctantly agreed to stand on stage alongside other contributors. Savannah joined the audience as the ceremony began. The mayor delivered a heartfelt speech about resilience, community, and economic recovery. Then came the moment everyone anticipated. One by one, key contributors were recognized. Finally, the mayor paused and smiled. "There is one individual who never asked for recognition," he said. In fact, he requested complete anonymity. But without his leadership, none of this would have been possible. The room grew silent. Savannah's heart pounded. The mayor turned toward Ethan. "Please join me in thanking Mr. Ethan Carter." Applause erupted immediately. Some guests looked stunned. Others appeared confused. Ethan walked onto the stage with visible reluctance. Then the mayor revealed something that transformed the atmosphere completely. He explained that Ethan had personally structured the recovery effort, coordinated investors, and provided resources through a private holding company that operated nationally. Gasps echoed throughout the ballroom. Savannah saw several people exchange shocked looks. Vanessa looked as though she could barely breathe. Yet the biggest surprise came next. The mayor continued speaking. He described Ethan as one of the most successful private investors in the region, a man whose business ventures had quietly created thousands of jobs across multiple states. For several seconds, nobody moved. The entire room struggled to process what they had just heard. Ethan Carter, the man Willow Creek mocked for years, was not a fool at all. And as Savannah watched the stunned faces surrounding her, she realized that the truth everyone had waited to discover was finally beginning to emerge, while an even bigger revelation still remained hidden just beyond the horizon. The drive home from the ceremony felt entirely different from every journey Savannah Brooks and Ethan Carter had shared before. The truth was finally beginning to surface, and Willow Creek would never see Ethan the same way again. As the pickup truck moved along the quiet country roads beneath a sky full of stars, Savannah sat silently beside him, replaying everything she had witnessed. The applause, the shocked faces, the mayor's announcement, the realization that the man everyone mocked had quietly become one of the most successful investors in the region. Yet the biggest mystery remained unanswered. Why had he hidden it all? When they arrived at the farmhouse, neither rushed inside. The cool evening air carried the scent of pine trees and freshly cut grass. Savannah stood on the porch looking out across the property before finally turning toward him. "Why?" she asked softly. Ethan knew exactly what she meant. He leaned against the railing and stared toward the distant horizon. "Because I wanted to know what life felt like when people wanted nothing from me." Savannah remained quiet. Ethan continued. "For most of my adult life, every conversation came with expectations. Every relationship came with conditions. People saw my success before they saw me." His voice carried no bitterness, only honesty. "After my father passed away, I stepped away from everything for a while. I needed space. I needed perspective." Savannah listened carefully. For the first time, he was allowing her to see behind the walls he had built. "So you came here?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "A place where nobody knew my name seemed perfect." He laughed softly. "Unfortunately, the rumors started almost immediately." Savannah smiled despite herself. "And you never corrected anyone?" "No." "Why not?" Ethan looked at her. "Because the rumors revealed who people really were." The answer lingered between them. Over the following days, the effects of the revelation spread throughout Willow Creek. Local newspapers published stories about Ethan's accomplishments. Television stations covered the recovery project. Business publications released articles describing his investment firm and the companies connected to his success. People who once ignored him suddenly wanted his attention. Invitations arrived daily. Community leaders requested meetings. Former critics became enthusiastic admirers. Savannah observed it all with growing amazement. The most dramatic reaction came from her own family. Her father called repeatedly. Relatives who barely acknowledged Ethan now praised him openly. Even neighbors who spent years laughing behind his back suddenly described him as a remarkable man. Yet nothing compared to Vanessa's reaction. One afternoon, Savannah returned home to find her sister standing near the farmhouse gate. Vanessa looked nervous, uncertain. It was a side of her Savannah had rarely seen. "Can we talk?" Vanessa asked. They sat together on the porch while the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the fields. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, Vanessa sighed. "I made a mistake." Savannah remained silent. Vanessa stared at the ground. "I thought I knew exactly what I wanted. Money. Status. A perfect life." She shook her head slowly. "Turns out I was too blind to recognize what was standing right in front of me." Savannah understood immediately. This was not really about wealth. It was about regret. Vanessa had rejected a man she never bothered to understand. A man whose character mattered far more than his success. Before leaving, Vanessa glanced toward the house. Ethan was working near the barn, completely unaware of the conversation. "You were lucky," she whispered. Savannah followed her gaze. For the first time since their unexpected wedding, she realized her sister was right. Not because Ethan was wealthy, not because he was powerful, but because beneath every secret and every hidden achievement, He had proven himself kind, patient, and genuine. And deep inside, Savannah was beginning to understand that the greatest revelation of all had nothing to do with Ethan's fortune. It had everything to do with the man he chose to be when nobody was watching. Autumn arrived quietly in Willow Creek, painting the countryside in shades of gold, amber, and crimson. Months had passed since the truth about Ethan Carter became public, yet the town still talked about little else. The story had become local legend. The man everyone dismissed had turned out to be one of the most successful businessmen in the region. But for Savannah Brooks, the most important changes were not happening in newspapers or conversations. They were happening inside the walls of the farmhouse they now shared. Life had settled into a peaceful rhythm. Mornings began with coffee on the porch. Evenings ended with long conversations beneath the stars. The uncertainty that once surrounded their marriage had gradually been replaced by trust. Not because Ethan revealed every secret overnight, but because Savannah finally understood the heart behind them. One Saturday afternoon, Ethan invited her to attend a charity gala in Atlanta. The event would celebrate community development projects throughout the Southeast. Savannah agreed, though she suspected there was more to the invitation than Ethan admitted. When they arrived, the ballroom shimmered with elegance. Crystal chandeliers reflected warm light across hundreds of guests. Business leaders, nonprofit directors, and public officials filled the room. Yet despite the grandeur, Ethan remained exactly as he always was. Polite, humble, comfortable, allowing others to stand in the spotlight. Throughout the evening, Savannah met people whose lives had been changed by projects Ethan supported. Small business owners thanked him for opportunities. Community leaders described neighborhoods transformed through investments. Families spoke about scholarships that helped their children attend college. One story after another revealed a side of Ethan he rarely discussed. As Savannah listened, pride filled her heart. Not because of his wealth, because of how he chose to use it. Later that evening, the event organizer stepped onto the stage. After recognizing several contributors, she surprised everyone by announcing a special award for outstanding community impact. The recipient's name drew immediate applause. Ethan Carter. Savannah smiled as the room rose to its feet. Ethan looked genuinely uncomfortable receiving the attention. He walked to the stage and accepted the award before approaching the microphone. The ballroom quieted. "I appreciate this honor," he began. "But success has never been something achieved alone." He paused briefly and looked toward Savannah. "The most important lessons in my life came from people who reminded me what truly matters." Savannah felt emotion rising unexpectedly. Ethan rarely spoke publicly about personal matters. The audience listened attentively. "For a long time, I believed accomplishments were enough," he continued. "Then I learned that character matters more than recognition, and kindness matters more than status." His eyes found hers again. "And sometimes the greatest gift life gives us is someone willing to see our worth before the rest of the world does." The applause that followed felt endless. Later, as guests mingled throughout the ballroom, Savannah stepped onto a quiet terrace overlooking the city lights. Ethan joined her a few moments later. Neither spoke immediately. The night air felt cool and peaceful. Finally, Savannah smiled. "You never told me about the award." Ethan laughed softly. "You would have worried about what to wear." She shook her head. "You are impossible." For a moment, they simply stood together, looking out across the city. Then Ethan reached into his pocket and removed a small velvet box. Savannah's eyes widened. "Ethan," he smiled. "The first time we exchanged rings, neither of us chose that moment." Her heart raced. "No. But every day since then, I have become more grateful for it." Carefully opening the box, he revealed a simple but elegant ring. "Savannah Brooks, if you had the chance to choose freely this time, would you still choose me?" Tears filled her eyes. Not because of the ring, not because of the city lights or the beautiful evening, but because she finally understood how far they had both traveled since that unexpected wedding day. With a smile brighter than any chandelier in the ballroom, she nodded. Yes. Beneath a sky filled with stars, surrounded not by obligation but by love, they began the next chapter of their story together. And for the first time, it was a future they had both chosen with their hearts.